So in this video what I'm going to be doing is having a look at all the recent projects that I've done using LumaFusion for my YouTube videos, and we'll just go through some of the videos and just look at the different techniques and methods that I've actually used in order to carry out some of the more creative elements of the videos. So with this particular video, well, we'll just come back out. So this is this past week I've done a series on comparisons between the Apple TV 4K and the LG C9 OLED's built-in apps for Disney Plus, Netflix, Apple TV Plus and Prime. So these were the 4 videos that I actually filmed for those, and then what I've done is I've imported all the footage into LumaFusion and then I've done all the editing from there. So if we come into LumaFusion's project for this particular one, as you can see from this particular timeline, most of it was literally just a case of clipping and snipping any bits that I didn't actually want, any pauses, long pauses. As you can see, if I scroll right to the end, this is a 12-minute video, and as I have come to realize that people's attention span on YouTube tends to be quite short. So for that reason, any long pauses or anything like that, I want to try and get rid of. Obviously this particular video is probably going to be a bit longer, but generally the people clicking on these types of videos are looking for hints and tips, so I'm probably going to be a bit more patient when it comes to sitting through and watching these types of videos. So as we scroll through, and I'll just scrub down the actual timeline. So with with all of these this series, with all 4 of these videos, what I was very mindful of was actually getting a content strike. So in this past week, in fact today, I actually got a copyright strike on my channel, and it was actually for something that is in quite a lot of my videos anyway, and that's basically the screensavers that come up on the Apple TV, and for some reason that actually got copyright strike. So it wasn't a content strike, it was an actual strike against my channel. So because of that, obviously I'm very mindful about what type of content I actually allow to play on the channel, because no matter what I do in terms of fair usage, they don't seem to be acknowledging it, and they literally just content strike everything initially. And with this particular video that got copyright strike, it'd been uploaded and processed, and it'd been on there waiting to actually become published for quite some time. So they would have had quite a lot of time to actually review it. If there was any issues with it, they could have obviously notified me, but the first I knew about it was when I actually went into it today. I uploaded a few videos for the past week, and just whilst I was on the actual website I realized that it had an actual copyright strike on there. So I'll wait and see what happens about that. It says it does expire automatically, but as I say, we'll wait and see. But as you can see, so throughout this sort of section here, because I've actually paused the content in the background, I wasn't really too mindful about applying any blurs or anything like that. You'll see that in the videos upcoming. But as we get down to here, as you can see, just here, if I come to here and then I hit, in fact what I'll do is I'll just mute this, because from past experience I realized that whatever is playing in the background will also play over as well. It might not even have any actual audio in terms of the movie that's playing, but it'll probably have me talking and they'll conflict. So if I just hit play, as you can see, it's actually playing in the background. So for that reason, what I've done is I've added a blur, and in order to add a blur, it's very simple. So if I just come back to this section, I'll do a cut here. In order to add a blur, you literally just duplicate the video that you're on, you double click into it, and then you want to come into your cropping section. So essentially you only want to crop out what you want to blur. So in this particular scenario, what we'll do is I'll just crop roughly just the video section itself. And then what you want to do is, once you've done that, you come across, you go to the teardrop, and you choose whatever type of blur you want. So if I hit that one, oh, I think I've clicked back. Yeah, I'm on the wrong one, that's why. So we'll just undo that, go back to this one. Yeah, as you can see, the cropping, I'll just use the actual controls. In fact, I believe the cropping on this one, yeah, the cropping's been adjusted, so I'll just reset all of those. Yeah, so that's the original file. Obviously we don't want to mess about with that one. We want to come into the second one and literally just crop this one. Normally you can actually just do it by hand, as I was trying to do, but obviously occasionally it does play up, so what I'll do is it's easy enough to do it this way. So same thing again, you literally just crop out just the part that you want to actually add the blur to, and then you click on whichever blur you want, and then there you go. So that's a very simple method of applying a blur. And in some of the videos that I've done recently, I actually had sections where I believe it was the sports one that I actually did, and what I ended up doing was, because of having a logo there and then another logo here, what I actually ended up doing was doing multiple layers. So obviously I've got 2 layers there. What I then did was duplicate it again, and then I duplicate it again, and then I think you can do one more as well. Yep, so you can do 6 layers in total, I believe. So in total, basically you can add loads of little sections of blur rather than having just one big one, which doesn't always, it's not as accurate, because obviously the image isn't always exactly straight. So in terms of this video, we've got a little bit of a blur there, and then same thing on here, just because the content's actually playing in the background, apply this same sort of blur. And what you can also do is, if I just apply a cut here, and if I duplicate this, so if you've got this sort of timeline where you've got it quite long and you've got quite a few instances of where you can have the blur, rather than having to go in and change those settings, or even saving a default, so you can save default user effects. So rather than saving one of those, what you can literally do is just click on it, one that you've already done. So get one that you're happy with, go to your clipboard, copy it. Now you come back to this one. So as you can see, there's no blur on this at the moment. You literally just hit the clipboard and hit paste, and there you go, it's applied the same sort of blur to the background. So that's what I've actually done on this one. So I would have only done the first one, and then every subsequent one I would have literally just gone and copied and pasted. And because it'll keep it on the actual clipboard, so if I just come to, I'll just create an extra cut here, and what I can do is add an extra layer, and if I just paste, as you can see, it's remembered what the details were, so it's literally just pasted in again. So nice and simple. Once you've done it once on this particular stretch of well, this particular project, you can literally just keep copying and pasting, and that applies for quite a few different effects as well. It doesn't always work with everything, but you can usually use it for these kind of crop, any of the picture aspects of it. So that was the first one, so that was Disney Plus. And as I say, with that particular one, there wasn't that much actual content playing. I was very mindful about keeping it paused. So let's come into the next one, Netflix. So this one seems to be a little bit more complicated. So we'll come across, and initially, yeah, so this is where I didn't actually do this on the first one. So what I'm basically doing is I'm highlighting an area there and an area there, and being mindful that not everybody will be watching this back on a big screen TV. Some people will be watching it on mobile devices, and obviously if it's this sort of size, then it can be hard to actually pick up what's going on there. So on this particular one, what I've done is I've literally just magnified those two areas, and I've deliberately not kept it right over the same area, because I wanted it just separated so that you can actually differentiate between this one and this one. So essentially the way that I've done that is, if I just come into it, what I've essentially done is same sort of thing. So I've literally just cropped that tiny little area there, and I'll just get that back where it was. So I've cropped that area there, and the way I've done it is you can adjust it by hand, or you can adjust it with these sliders, and then in order to round it off, you just come down to your corner radius, and you literally just apply a corner radius. And then once you've done that, what you do is, once you've cropped it, you come into your sizing, and as you'll see from the sizing, it's a lot bigger. So I've basically just increased the size, and once you increase the size, it'll go off screen. So at that point, you'll also need to move it into whichever area that you wanted to move it. Same sort of thing with this top right bubble, essentially, where this one here is showing you the Dolby Atmos symbol, and this one here is showing you the Dolby Vision. So if I just scroll forward, as you can see just there on this one, you've got Dolby Atmos, and then if I scroll a little bit more, there you go, you've got the Dolby Vision. And basically if I just corner, you can see this, I'll leave it paused, and if I just make that bit bigger, in fact, let me just mute all of these just to be on the safe side. So if I just make that a bit bigger, as you can see, even if this is on a phone screen, that is now a lot more visible now for anybody. It's clear that you can see the Dolby Vision logo very clearly, and you can see the Dolby Atmos writing very clearly as well. So that would have been the first point that I did that. This is literally just an overlay. So whenever I shoot video, generally I'm trying to do this all in one cut, because it makes it a lot easier to edit if I can just go through and snip out bits that I don't need. But obviously occasionally because this is, I mean, this one, if you look at it, is 15 minutes after all the cuts, but originally it probably would have been close to about 20 minutes. So because I'm literally just talking and talking, as with this video, there will be one or two either mistakes or something where I've missed out. So for that reason, I'll literally just do a few overlays of text, just pointing out if something is something definitely needs to be pointed out. So for example, if it's either a mistake that I've made saying Dolby Atmos instead of Dolby Vision, or vice versa, or if it's an additional service. So in this instance, I believe what I was mentioning was the slow buffering. So in terms of when you first play something and it almost loads up in HD first, and then it'll actually switch over to 4K. So because of that, essentially what it does is it enables me to just point out any obvious issues that I might have noticed when I was actually editing it. So it's coming across to this one now, and this is exactly the same as the first bit. So because I did it on the first example, I've then done it on this second example as well. So it's literally just highlighting everything, and as you can see, if I go to this is the kind of viewpoint you would normally get on a normal screen. So as you can see, that's really big, it's clear, it's easily visible. So for mobile users, it's just making life a bit easier for them. Yes, it takes me longer to actually edit this in and make it like this, but hopefully anybody watching it on their mobile devices will benefit from seeing this compared to trying to struggle to see it on a really small area of their screen. So if I just scroll across, so yeah, this part was where I've actually put in a stopwatch overlay. So for anybody who doesn't know how to add stopwatch using LumaFusion, essentially all you have to do is screen record your actual stopwatch on your phone. So essentially all I did was I did this. So I've done a screen recording of my stopwatch, and do it for however long you need it to be. So in this instance, I knew most of the examples are probably going to be roughly around 2.5 minutes, something like that. And because of that, what I've done is I've screen recorded it, and then what you do is I'll show you an example live. So there's already one here, so what we'll do is we'll come across to just this random area. So what I'll do is I'll just drop this on top, and I have actually saved some presets. So if you look here, I actually have a preset for stopwatch, but what I'll do is I'll show you how to do it from scratch. So essentially you click into it, you go to your cropping, and you adjust your top and bottom. So you bring it down to however you actually want it in terms of how much you want visible. And obviously you can be a lot more accurate with this. I wasn't really too fussed because of where I'm going to actually position this. So next thing you want to do is come across into effects, go to your chroma keys, and the one I used was just dark luma key, and that it will get rid of the solid background obviously from the screen recording, and it'll make it slightly see-through. Now making adjustments on here, for me it didn't really make any difference. So even if I adjust all of these, it's still pretty it's still going to have a little bit of a shadow behind it. So I couldn't actually get rid of the shadow completely, but I'm not really too fussed about that, because I don't actually mind it having that little bit, because what it'll do is it'll just make the text a little bit clearer as well. And then the final thing is literally just positioning it wherever you wanted to. If you wanted to, you could also make it bigger. In this instance, I'd probably just leave it in the original size, just to make sure that the clarity is as good as it can be. And then if we just hit play now, as you'll see, it's now playing back with a real-time stopwatch, so it saves you having to do something that's really complicated in order to try and sync up the seconds. So that's an easy tip for you in terms of how to add a stopwatch overlay over the top of your videos. Apart from that, in this cut, basically what I've done is, the idea behind this particular one was literally showing you the difference between what it looks like when it's paused on the Apple TV compared to the LG C9. So if I just hit play, as you can see, the brightness difference between these two is quite a lot. So in this instance, obviously, if you go back and watch the video, you can see all the recommendations I made. But once again, it's not particularly this particular clip I've actually copied from earlier on in the video. So all I've done is I've literally just come back to somewhere where I would have probably around here somewhere, and I would have literally just done a cut, copied that and brought it across to here and just pasted it over the top. And then once again, I have these presets. So if I come into here, so the two presets I have is this one, picture left 50% and picture right 50%, and what that does, it just evenly puts it into the window. So then basically every single time I do this kind of comparison, it's just nicely spaced out for me. So that was the Netflix version. Netflix video that I actually produced. So next one was Apple TV Plus, and if we click into this one, so okay, so this one initially same sort of thing, so it's literally just highlighting the various aspects of the screen, just making them a bit more visible and making it more obvious in terms of where they need to look. This particular part, so yeah, so I've added, in this section I've added a blur, in exactly the same way that I showed you previously. And the only reason I've added it here and not previously is because this is actually moving content. I've separated the audio probably because I've made a cut on one of the parts, probably just cutting out something there where I didn't want to actually cut the video, but I needed to just get rid of that pause in the audio. So for that reason, I've literally just separated the audio and done it that way. And for anybody who doesn't know how to separate audio, you literally just click on it and then click that icon there, and that separates your audio for you. So if you wanted to get rid of your audio just from that one section, you literally just hit delete and that's it, it's gone. Looking further on, so same sort of thing, that's just highlighting the various sections. And then these are all cuts where I've literally just applied a blur, and as you can see, it's exactly the same way. So if I just click into this one and I come to cropping, there you go, you can see it's got that section of the screen cropped. And if I come into the color effects, you can see it's got Gaussian blur of 20 applied. Coming across further, let's just see what all of these are. Yeah, so similarly again, so this is literally just a stopwatch applied. Audio was separated on this section. It was actually separated because I wanted to get rid of the audio from 1 or 2 bits. So if I just there you go, so I wanted to cut out that audio, but because I've got the stopwatch running, I didn't want to actually delete that because it would then mess up the actual timing. So for that reason, obviously I've literally just separated the audio and deleted those particular parts. And then what I've done at the end of this is, there's probably a few different ways that you can actually do this, but essentially what I wanted to show here was, at the point the screensaver kicks in, I wanted to freeze the seconds, the timer, the on-screen stopwatch. So for the way I did it, as I say, there's probably different ways of doing it, but what I actually did was I literally just made a cut at the point where it actually separates, and then I literally just went into speed, so it won't be on that one, it'll be on this one. So I went into speed and I literally just reduced it all the way down, as low as it'll go. And then basically what happens is, from here all the way to here, it's literally just one frame of this this overlay video that's actually ticked over because I've slowed the speed down so much. But essentially what it does is it just leaves it on screen long enough to where anybody who's watching it can see that, yeah, it stopped. That's what the time was when this particular action occurred or event occurred, which was what I was looking for, to see how long it takes for the screensaver to kick in. So other than that, the rest of this, because on this particular one, because I separated the audio before I did the cut, all of these separate cuts, it basically separated all the audio, so it didn't really make any difference. So I could literally just go through and trim as needed. So that one, once again, so it's got a few additions in terms of techniques in that particular video. So coming into the prime one, I think this one will probably be very similar. So it'll literally just have, yeah, so you've got your bubble overlays for your HDR and Dolby Atmos, and then it'll be the same sort of thing when I then tested it on Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos on the built-in app. This is just highlighting the HDR again. This would have been when I was actually switching between the two to test why the Apple TV was actually getting HDR as opposed to the built-in app on the LG C9, which was actually getting Dolby Vision. And this was literally just a stopwatch overlay. When I was actually doing this particular test, I didn't feel comfortable with it, so I ended up actually stopping it. So once I got to this point, I actually stopped it, so that's why I actually got rid of the stopwatch as well. But that was literally just to show you how long it was before I actually started to feel, no, I'm not comfortable leaving this on screen, so I'll get rid of it. And then coming on to this section here, so this is where I've basically done them side by side. This is literally just to give you some sort of an idea between the differences in terms of brightness, but it wasn't paused necessarily on exactly the same scene. It was literally just to show you the difference in terms of overlay. So let me just pause that and I'll explain. So in terms of this window on the right, as you can see, it's not really got any overlays. The screen dimmed just a touch, but the original picture is on there, whereas on the built-in app you get this text coming up, overlay, and basically what was happening was this top section here was dimming slightly and this bottom section here was dimming slightly, but it wasn't actually dimming the screen. What it was doing was this overlay was creating a slight dimming effect, but you still ended up with characters and text there, whereas on the right, on the Apple TV, basically you didn't have any of that, so there wasn't any additional text or imagery coming up on screen that could potentially cause issues with regards to burning and things like that. So yeah, so the rest of it was pretty simple, literally just cuts between different pauses, gaps in the audio and video. So that was the prime one. And then one test that I actually ran straight after that was the Dolby Vision versus HDR10. And with this, originally I did actually film a much longer intro, but delving into the settings and what I'd actually chosen between for the different picture modes. But essentially, because you're comparing HDR10 to Dolby Vision, the actual settings are slightly different in terms of color temperature. So on HDR10 you get a slider with white level, and I believe that was set to white 25 or 20, something like that. But essentially that's your white balance, and that obviously makes it cooler or warmer in terms of picture. So when you're actually looking at these two, and what I'll do is I'll try and get it to, yeah, that's probably a good spot. So as you can see, there's a clear difference here. Let me just mute the audio again. If I just come back to that same spot. So yeah, so you can see there's a clear difference in terms of color tone, but that's not necessarily so much down to the different settings as it could potentially be the difference between how HDR10 is handled compared to Dolby Vision. So if I come to this scene here, so as you can see on the right, the sky and everything is all the information is maintained, whereas on the left on HDR10 it's getting blown out, and that's because obviously it's static metadata. So it's literally just from whatever point, I don't know whether it's the start or it chooses the highest peak or what it actually uses as its gauge, but everything thereafter will be using that same metadata. So if the scene changes, if it becomes brighter, if it becomes darker, you're not getting the benefit of what you get with HDR10 Plus and Dolby Vision, which is obviously the TV can adapt scene by scene. So this whole video was shot literally just to point that out. There may be a slight difference in terms of color tone, but the color tone alone won't actually account for this much of a difference when it comes to both colors. So obviously on the right you can clearly see it's a lot bluer, And yet you would think that with the settings that I have, because I have the Dolby Vision settings set to warm 2, which is a lot warmer compared to what the left could possibly be on if it's set on white 25 as opposed to 20. But similarly, if I come across more, so in this image here, as you can see, the image on the right, it looks more balanced in terms of maintaining all the details and everything. And it probably won't be all the way through. You might be able to find a scene where it's the other way around, but essentially all your highlights are getting blown out on the left. And these were both filmed back to back, so there was no cut, there was no changes in settings. Literally the only difference between these is, and I did try to match up the actual picture settings as best as I could in terms of Cinema Home in Dolby Vision as well as Cinema Home in HDR10 on the left. So both the settings, as far as I could get them, I tried to get them as identical as possible. So literally the biggest difference between these two will be the different technologies in terms of HDR10 and Dolby Vision. So but the most difficult thing about this particular video was literally just syncing up the start, because I did back-to-back cuts, one straight cut. Essentially what I had to do was trim this video manually and then insert it over the top and then try and sync it up. And the other thing was, as you can see just in this video, this clip, you've got HDR10 just well, the HDR logo there, and the handshake between HDR for some reason always seems to be slightly longer than the handshake between Dolby Vision. And for those who don't know what I mean by handshake, that's when, if you run your TV in SDR mode generally, when you actually switch to HDR, your screen will go black, and that's referred to as a handshake. That's basically where it's changing from SDR mode to either HDR10 or is switching over to Dolby Vision. And basically that handshake can differ. So even though I may have started this at exactly the same time, so from the point I click the play button, the time before it actually loads up was slightly different. So because of that, I had to actually trim some of this. So as you can see, if you try and look at the audio on this particular track, it's not quite bang on, and that's because obviously there was a slight difference in terms of when it actually kicked in on the two different audio tracks. Now probably I could have actually done that bit and got that slightly across, but it's so close at this point, if I scrub through, that it's essentially the same thing on screen at the same time. Any difference between that and that, so where I'm looking is just this section here, is literally, what is it, so 44:36 and 45, so it's less than a second. So realistically hardly anybody's going to actually notice that. If I wanted to, obviously I could have probably got that even closer, but it was in terms of syncing it up, that is pretty close in terms of how close I've actually got it. So nothing else really too complicated about this one. And I think, yeah, and the last one was literally just the OLED burn-in test. And for this I literally have my my intros saved and my outro, and then with the OLED tests I do a single cut. I don't do any cuts, so that's just to make it as honest and as unbiased as I possibly could in terms of showing exactly what's going on. But yeah, so that's all of the ones for this past week. Most of this has actually been filmed in the last 2 days. As I mentioned at the start, because of the shift I was working this past week, I've been, basically I don't get time to do anything during the day. So for that reason, generally what I'll do toward the end of the week, I'll probably film all my videos and then I'll schedule them for a date somewhere in the future. But anyway, as I've added a few more techniques in terms of LumaFusion, I thought I'd make this sort of update video, and I may do this from time to time if I come across any interesting projects that I've actually done, just to give people out there tips in terms of what they could actually implement into their videos, and also give people an idea of how much work actually goes into the production of one single video. So if we just look between, so this is 15 minutes, and as you can see, the amount of cuts and edits and additions I've actually added onto it, additional layers, if we come back to the prime one in terms of the comparisons, all of these kind of cuts and edits, it's very time consuming. All of this probably would have taken me, I'd probably say, at least 4 to 5 hours. So as you can see, and that's before obviously you export, and then your export time is obviously probably going to be a bit longer than whatever the actual video itself is. So obviously with this one, if it's 14 minutes, the export time is going to probably be between, say, 20 and 25 minutes, something like that, depending on how hot the phone has been. So this past week the weather's been really hot, and because of that the phone's been heating up, and usually I'd actually keep the phone on charge when I'm actually exporting. Recently what I've had to do is just leave it off charge because the phone was heating up that much. But as you can see, a lot of work goes into this, and then after all of that you still have to upload. Once you've uploaded, you've got to create the custom thumbnails, edit all the details, come up with some sort of theme in terms of your naming for the video. So there's a lot of work that actually goes into it, and it's not as simple as what I originally thought when I first started doing, which was literally just film and upload and don't worry about anything else. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, but it's something that I do enjoy doing, and all of these kind of comparisons, it's basically just more information, it's more knowledge, and it basically just helps me out in terms of my techniques, and hopefully it's helping anybody else out there who is actually watching these videos. So with that, I'll call it a day for this one. Obviously, if you have enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't already done so, please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon, that way you're notified whenever I upload a new video. Thank you very much for watching.